and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please. Supervisors Gabe Nudo and David Arrington are excused. They both called me. Thank you. This time we'll open it up to citizens' comments. Anybody wishing to speak? Step up to the mic. Give us your name and address.
My name is Robert Spencer. I live on 116th Street, 2125. I wanted to come to the county board meeting, and they just redid my road out there and did a really nice job and all. But a concern has come up that, and it's been a concern for years since they put in the Walmart, is that's become a shortcut. What it's become, and the sheriff's department's done a great job. I've talked to them, and they've upped patrols. But I'd really like to see if we could get the speed limit dropped from 45 to 35. Just within about a quarter mile, we got a little over 26 children living on that road, all with driveways on 116th Street, which is County Road V. And I'd like to see if y'all had any input on. I did get with the sheriff's department. They're getting me a report. I just didn't realize the meeting was this evening until I got online today. But they're going to give me a report on the violations that are occurring on that road, especially going towards speeding. But we got boys that go over that road in excess of 75 miles an hour all the time. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? Anybody else wishing to speak? Seeing none, citizens' comments are closed. Announcements of the chair. Hope Council is having a pumpkin roll. Pardon? A celebrity pumpkin roll, which you all qualify for. So, and that's going to be on Saturday, October 20th. So if you want further information, contact the clerk's office. That's all I have. At this point, we'll open it up to supervisor reports. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sometime this week, earlier this week, yesterday, I attended the Land and Water Conservation Committee. We went over several things. This is our first committee that we've had this year. Usually we have these quarterly. Some of the things that are going on right now, they are having their tour this year. It's going to be in Kenosha County. They're going to be having lunch at Uline. It's going to start out at the center up at 45 and 50. They're going to go over to the Silver Lake Park, and John Rudy's going to give a presentation about the new bike path over there and the bridges. Then they're going to head over to the Fox River and talk about the buyout program. Then they're going to go out to the West End Recreational Park and have another conversation out there with John Rudy. He's going to probably walk part way around the path with everyone, and they're going to head over to Uline and have lunch over there. They've graciously opened up their nice facility over there for lunch at the lodge, and then they're going to head over to Petrifying Springs and talk about the dam removal project. Then they're going to have a mini hike over at the Chilwaukee Prairie also, and then head back to the Kenosha County Center. If anyone's interested in going on that tour, they can certainly see me and I can give them the information on that. Kenosha County 2013 tree order is upon us. Every year the land development has a form that they send out to everyone if anyone wants to purchase a whole bunch of trees. You have to buy them in bulk. I have a nice form here. You can go on the website also and pick one of those up. Also, we had a really nice presentation. The people from Camp and Center Lake Rehabilitation District came in and gave us a presentation on what they're doing out at their lake out there. I try to have them come in once a year just so that we can find out. This is the biggest body of water out there, and they have a very, very nice brochure that they put together every year. It talks extensively about the rehabilitation that they do on the lakes over there and how they keep all the invasive species down and everything. So if anyone wants to read through that, I have that also. That's it for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Bruning. Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one note from Human Services. Tomorrow, Wednesday, September 19th, from 12:30 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. at the Kenosha County Center out at Highway 45 and 50. There's a job fair that will be held, and in attendance will be our State Secretary of Workforce Development, Reggie Newsom, who will be there from 12:30 to 2 p.m. To entertain questions and interviews from the media. All county supervisors are certainly invited and encouraged to attend. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Hallman. Seeing no other lights, we'll proceed with business.
Resolution 13 from Planning Development and Extension Education Committee, Rita A. and Arthur L. Voss, trustees. Owner Edward Voss, agent. Request of rezoning from A1 Agricultural Preservation District to R2 Suburban Single Family Residential District located in the town of Brighton. Brunig, yes. Decker, excused. Underhill, yes. Dodge, yes. Skalitsky, yes.
Supervisor Brunig.
Ordinance number 13.
Ordinance number 13 has been moved by Supervisor Brunig, seconded by Supervisor Skalitsky. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This property is located on the north side of 31st Street, County Trunk Highway JB, approximately 0.2 miles east of 308th Avenue. This rezoning will allow for a line adjustment, a lot line adjustment. The lot line adjustment is to correct the property line from running through an existing accessory building located partially on the adjacent parcel. This will then require the owner to raise or reduce the size of the separate existing farm building and to be compliant with the new lot line. The town of Brighton recommended approval of the request.
Thank you, Supervisor Brunig. All those in favor of Ordinance 13?
Aye.
Any opposed? That ordinance passes.
Resolution 44 from Judicial Committee regarding probationary cabaret license for Kickstand LLC. Esposito, yes. Ron Johnson, yes. Boyd Frederick, yes. Arrington, excused. Anita Johnson, excused. Montemiro, yes. Noble, yes.
Supervisor Esposito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move Resolution 44.
It's been moved by Supervisor Esposito to approve Resolution 44, seconded by Supervisor Noble. Supervisor Esposito.
This is a probationary cabaret license for Kickstand LLC. The Sheriff's Department did do an inspection of the property. They recommended approval. Captain Falduto is here if anybody has any questions tonight. I urge your approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Esposito. Supervisor Molinaro.
Thank you. Sorry about the once there. For those of you who heard me opening my packet just now, I did get it electronically, but apparently the post office sent it back to the clerk's office this week. So I didn't get a chance to read this one, which is why I have a question. I'm looking in here under the Sheriff's Department Supplementary Investigation Report. And is this, it has to do with a fence for sound control purposes or something? And the applicant stated that he needed the cabaret license in order to fund the installation of the fence. Is that accurate?
Supervisor Esposito.
If I may, through the chair to the chairman of the committee.
Thank you. Supervisor Esposito.
We can ask Captain Falduto about that.
Captain Falduto.
You could speak to that, please.
I believe that the intent even though he said he was going to fund it, by funding it, he meant he was going to use the revenue from installing the cabaret license and putting on live entertainment to pay for it.
And I see that here. In fact, it states specifically, Stephen told me he was putting the cart in front of the horse. Stephen said that he needed the cabaret license to make money to fund his construction and future plans. I guess the very specific question I have is he in full compliance, or is he looking for us to give him something that allows him to make money so he can commit to getting into full compliance, again, through the chair to get the building?
I was informed by the sergeant who did the inspection that he is in full compliance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Molinaro. Supervisor Noble? No? Okay. Seeing no other lights? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That resolution passes.
Resolution 45 from Judiciary and Law Committee regarding probationary cabaret license for Jetty's Bar. Esposito, yes. Ron Johnson, yes. Boyd Frederick, yes. Arrington, excused. Anita Johnson, excused. Montemiro, yes. Noble, yes.
Supervisor Esposito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will move Resolution 45.
Resolution 45 has been moved by Supervisor Esposito, seconded by Supervisor Ron Johnson. Supervisor Esposito.
Again, this is a probationary cabaret license for Jetty's Bar. As the previous cabaret license, it was inspected by the Sheriff's Department, and if anybody has any questions, Captain Falduto is here to answer them. I urge your approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Esposito. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That resolution is passed.
Resolution 46 from the Executive Committee regarding access to paperless materials pertaining to county board and committee meetings. Gens, yes. Kubicki, yes. Rose, yes. Alverman, yes. Hallman, excused. Esposito, yes. Brunig, yes.
Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Resolution number 46.
Resolution number 46 has been moved by Supervisor Brunig, seconded by Supervisor Hallman. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This resolution was brought before the county board before and referred over to the executive committee. We've had several meetings on this. I believe that we have come to an agreement on this. Just a follow-up, the software that we are going to be using is Civic Plus. This is also the new website software. The new website will be going live, I believe, September 25th, I'm sorry, September 25th. The nice thing about this software is that once we go paperless, everything will be on a drop and drag system, and very easy for everyone to set up their packets. I believe that the best thing for the county is to go paperless. Everyone's moving towards that. The technology is moving towards that, and I think that this is going to pave the way for future things. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Brunig. Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question about this. I was in attendance at the executive committee meeting of 9/11/12. I guess I must not have signed it, but unless I'm delusional, I'm quite certain I was there. I spoke on it.
Okay, we'll mark you're voting for it. We'll see that that's cleared up.
Thank you.
Supervisor Ron Frederick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I read the resolution, it's a little short on detail about how this is going to be implemented. So I thought I would call around to the counties that are listed in here: Walworth County, Racine County, Waukesha County, Milwaukee County. So I called the Waukesha County Clerk, Kim Bushy, and asked her how they implemented their paperless, and she said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, from what I understand, you're paperless in Walworth County." She said, "Well, we have one supervisor that has a laptop, and that's it." So Waukesha County is not paperless. I called Walworth County. I called Waukesha County and talked to Mary Peterson, who's the county board aide, and asked her if they were paperless. And she says 2 out of 25 are. Racine County, from what I could pick up, 0. So I don't know where this information came from by the maker of this resolution as to these counties being paperless. The reason I called is because I look at this and it says at the last paragraph, effective be paperless. And I said to myself, well, how is this going to work? Okay, my concern obviously is that I look on the internet, which I can. I don't know if everyone here has a computer, and I look on the internet and I can, I'm sure, get the agenda and pick it up. But I'm not going to be able to print 30 or 40 pages of this agenda at home and bring it to the meeting because I got to have my copies. Okay, So I guess the question is, and Milwaukee County, by the way, they are paperless. However, each county board supervisor is furnished a laptop. Gateway, I know, was paperless because I was on the board over there, and what we did was we had a laptop they furnished it to us, and then we brought it to our meetings, and we brought the agenda up on the floor there so we could go through the agenda. So I think this thing needs to have some clarification as to how this is going to work, not just put it on a piece of paper, adopt it, and say, okay, we go paperless on January 2013 without some kind of details as how it's going to happen. Okay? I think this needs a little bit of work. Oh, another thing I did find out, when I looked up on the internet, I could see that some of the counties don't meet as often as we do. Well, Walworth County has, I think they have something like 14 meetings. Waukesha has 19 and Racine has 19. So that's another avenue we might want to look at to save dollars. But I think this resolution needs a little work, and I'm not okay because it did work at Gateway, but there's got to be something that's a little more solid than just saying we're going paperless on 2013, and that's it. And of course, I understand that at committee, it was discussed that if anyone didn't want to, they could still get their agenda. So maybe the maker of the resolution can explain a little bit to everybody. And please, I hope you'll talk closer to your mic than you have been because I want to make sure I hear you. And tell me just exactly how this is going to happen. And that please tell me I'm not going to have to bring it up at home and print all 30 or 20 or pages at home at my expense, and my printer will print about 5 pages a minute, I guess. Please tell me this isn't going to cost me any money at home, and please tell me how you're going to do it, because I would like to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Frederick. Supervisor Alverman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was at the past executive committee meeting, and I either missed that last sentence or our discussion wasn't what I remembered. The county board will be completely paperless in January 2013. What we were told at that meeting was that we were going to move into the executive committee, I believe the human services and maybe IT, as pilot programs, and then it was going to move onto the county board. January
of 2013. That is not my recollection. Definitely, I would say that we won't have time to do that. We did discuss what people would do if they didn't have access or could not print these things out and do the work, and we did discuss that packets would still be available for people. So the way the resolution is written this evening, I could not support, specifically because of that last sentence in the resolution. So if we can't resolve that this evening, I would like to move that this be referred back to the executive committee.
It's been moved by Supervisor Elverman, seconded by Supervisor Ron Frederick to refer this back to the executive committee. There are a number of lights on, so let's clear all the requests to speak, and we'll go to who has comments on the referral back to the committee. So you can feel free to push your mic at that point. Supervisor Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say that in general terms, I'm in favor of this resolution. I'm in favor of being referred back to committee. I would think under the circumstance where we do go quote-unquote paperless, there would be a situation where each one of us would want to have some type of display screen monitor, some way of actually taking a look at the documentation in front of us in lieu of having a printed copy. My question is, as this goes back to committee hopefully for reconsideration, do we have the infrastructure here in the county board chambers that if we brought our own laptop, one was supplied, notebook, whatever your terminology is, do we have the infrastructure that wirelessly we can pull this data up from the website? That is both my question and my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Grady. Would somebody from IT like to address that?
Yes, we do have the capability for wireless in here. You can connect to any wireless compatible device, pad, a laptop, any Android, anything like that can be connected, and you can access the website. The one that's being presented for handling the paperless agendas or any other website.
And a follow-up on that question through the chair, you're saying that this is in place currently or this is proposed?
It is in place currently.
Okay. So there'd be enough bandwidth, there'd be enough technical infrastructure to support all supervisors on their individual devices?
Yes.
As we are stated currently?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Grady. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to clear some of this up tonight so that we can move on with this. Regarding the other counties that have gone paperless, this is information that I was given to by the IT director when we wrote up this original resolution. Marty had done extensive research on this and had contacted each of the counties themselves. Whether or not the supervisors are using it as paperless is a different problem, and that's their own problem. But each county has gone paperless. The statement on whether or not they would have to print it themselves, we discussed this in committee, where you could still get your own packet, you could contact the clerk's office and they would print off a copy for you, but she would not mail them out anymore. You would have to go and pick it up yourself. For those on the west end, you could have it delivered out to the 45 and 50 building and pick up the packet there. That's where Supervisor Decker and I are now picking up our packets. As far as the last statement on the resolution about the county board going paperless, this was discussed, and I did contact Linda Haney just to make sure that I understood that correctly before it was put in the resolution, and she she listened to the tape again, and it was part of the tape, having that in the resolution. So just wanted to clear those up. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Brunig. Supervisor Skalitsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, for one, support this resolution. Change is never easy, but many times change is overdue. When I look at this resolution and I see an estimate of approximately $15,000 in savings to the taxpayers of Kenosha County, I think that's a good thing. We're here to represent the best interests of our constituents and the taxpayers. We've got a very simple change here that would deliver very easy savings to our budget. Whether it could be returned or allowed, or returned to the taxpayer, or the taxpayer is allowed to keep it in their own pocket, or even possibly applied to some other usage that has of greater need. I can see it. At the bottom it says, with paper available to those that request it. So I don't really see, I realize technology sometimes can be scary, and maybe it's new and something that not everybody's familiar with. There are concerns there, and those can't be ignored. On the other hand, if you feel that you need a hard copy or a packet in front of you, it states right here in the resolution that they'll be provided. So I see no reason for this to go back to committee to be, I guess, debated once again and then brought back to the floor. We simply should be able to vote on the merits of this resolution, which is a positive thing for not only supervisors but the taxpayers. And if you feel that you want to slowly immerse yourself into it, paper packets are available, so I don't see the downside whatsoever. It may be a little cumbersome at first, but I think we're an intelligent enough group here that we can work our way through it. And a question that I have, and Mr. Chairman, maybe from somebody from IT can perhaps bring it up. We used to have the screen behind you. Is there a way that we can project each page or resolution or ordinance, or whatever the case that we're covering at that time behind you, so that we would be able to read it there for those that maybe they don't have a laptop, a tablet, things of that nature. But at this time, I will support this resolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Skalitsky. Supervisor Underhill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As some of you may know, the committee I'm on, PDAC, or Planning and Development, UW, has already gone paperless. And
sorry about that.
And I haven't been getting my emails from the proper people at PDAC. This is this is the first I've heard of this new software that or Supervisor Bruning was talking about. But if it's anything like the sound system we've been dealing with, I think we need to take this a little slower to make sure this is going to work for all of us, because I'm all for saving the taxpayers' money, believe me. But I don't want to be, myself and the other supervisors, using a cumbersome system that we won't be able to access down the road. I did some investigating, as Supervisor Ron Frederick said. I called these different counties and got the same information. And when I mentioned to Waukesha about the $15,000 savings, she just about laughed on she was laughing on the phone. She says, I don't know where you'd spend $15,000 a year printing out packets. She says it's just not there. I don't see it. And they got 25 supervisors in Waukesha County. And I'm sure they got a lot more. Like I said, I was super in favor of this whole thing when it came down to when it was first discussed. But since I've seen how it's worked at PDAC, you got to prove it to me that it's going to work. And I'm not afraid of change. I got a BlackBerry or laptop, computer. I'm not afraid of technology at all. I'm willing to change. But you know what? I don't want to be hindered to do my job with inadequate equipment. And then one of the other things I was trying to get my today I was trying to get my email. The last 2 days, I've been trying to
What's
get
your
my
point of order?
Debate, or, you know, I'm trying to be patient, but we're going to debate it, we're going to debate it, but right now on the floor is a referral.
I'm sorry, but I've listened to you a number of times.
All right, let's just...
Go on and on and on about stuff, and nobody calls you on it. Now all of a sudden, I speak one time in the almost 2 years I've been here, and he's calling me out of order? Come on. I'm sorry, but let me finish. It's just going to take me a second. I was talking to one of the IT guys today. I've been trying to get my email straightened out with my email address, and
Of course it is.
the IT guy, I asked the IT guy about this, and he says, you know what? I've heard this 30 years ago about paperless. And you know, the only thing they've done is make faster printers. Thank you.
Okay, let's try to stick to the referral. Supervisor Noble.
Thank you. I'm in favor of referral. I believe if it was exactly like Supervisor Skalitsky, I could support it, but if you really read this as it's written, it says that the Executive and Human Services Committee will utilize paperless packets with paper to those that request them beginning in November 2012. And then it says beginning in January 2013, both of those two committees will be completely paperless, as well as the county board will be completely paperless. So the way I read this, it's going to be like 2 months where you could have an option to get paper, and then after that it's completely paperless with no thought or written word in terms of supervisors that may or may not have access to the internet. And what are you going to do if a supervisor doesn't have? Is that like a prerequisite now to be a supervisor, that you can't be a supervisor unless you have access to the internet? Those of us that are currently serving, if we don't have access to the internet, are we to resign our position because we can no longer get a copy of the agenda? I don't know. I think we're making it very cumbersome, and as these supervisors have called these other counties up, even though they may have enacted some paperless thing, they still give supervisors the option to get the written copy. I'm old-fashioned. I still get the Kenosha News. I still like the written newspaper. I don't like to go online and read my news. And I don't really think I want to go online and read my agenda either. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Noble. Supervisor Kohlmeyer.
Sorry, just had a question on the motion, not on the referral. So
Okay. You have a question on referral, or?
No, I just
Okay.
on the motion, not on referral.
Supervisor Brunig. It's showing she's on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This does not need to go back to committee. Supervisor Underhill, I understand your concern, but I can tell you that this was gone over in the committee regarding the when certain people got together and we talked about the Civic Plus, and that this would be the best way to do it. The $15,000 actually does not just come from the county board packets. It is all of the committee packets that go out. When you look at all of the committees that we have and all the paper that is being printed and sent out to every single person, that is where the $15,000 comes from. We've gone over this with the IT director, and this is the number that he came up with, and it was given also to Supervisor Hallman when he did his survey last time. So the $15,000, I truly believe, is a correct number. It's actually more than that. So I don't have a problem standing behind that $15,000 number. As far as whether or not we need to actually have it as a qualification to be a supervisor in order that we have to have a laptop. I can tell you, if you don't have an email address, how are you taking care of your constituents? Because there's a lot of people out there that don't want to pick up the phone. They would rather send you an email when they have time. So if you don't have an email address, I'm really surprised. Just very surprised. Were there any other questions that I missed? Did you have another question?
Supervisor Bruning, you done?
I don't know. I'm waiting for more questions.
Okay.
Well, I can guarantee that. Oh, Supervisor Underhill, you had a question about the email system. The paperless does not go through the email system. It's going to go through the Civic Plus, where you will log in to get it. Now, if everyone got the email today from Sean regarding the new email system, did everyone see that yet? Check your email. There's a new way to get in there. That's it.
Thank you, Supervisor Bruning. Supervisor Hallman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This does not need to go back to committee. We've been having this conversation for at least a year, if not a year and a half, to the best of my recollection. We convened a small group under the previous chairman, Supervisor Molinaro, specifically to discuss IT issues. And going paperless was one of the things that committee addressed, about how to do that and exactly whether or not supervisors would be interested in doing that. Would some currently be interested? Would some gain interest? Or would others simply choose not to participate? The infrastructure to do this has been put in place. It is part of the Civic Plus, which is the new website that we are unveiling. I believe it is next Tuesday on the 25th of this month. So all of the departments are working with a new software application that lets them basically put the information in. You'll log in. You'll have access to it. It's always been the idea from the beginning that folks who did not wish to be paperless would have the option to have a hard copy provided to them. It was expressly stated, particularly to me, by Supervisor Molinaro last year, that we'd be that sensitive and pay attention to that detail, understanding that not everyone would be comfortable going completely paperless. People would still want a hard copy. So basically, this is, as Supervisor Sklitsky has said, really it makes no sense whatsoever to send this back to committee. We can do this, and folks who wish to still have things provided to them in a hard copy format, it will still be provided to them. All I can say is it really makes no sense whatsoever to send this back to committee. I will make one other note here. We have made some huge advancements in terms of the audio recordings of our meetings and how we used to transcribe them. We have saved a fairly considerable sum by not having to write them out and so forth and do some of the other things, so, which was also part of some of what that committee on IT had done. So this is all really part of a package, and we're sort of just completing this now. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Hallman. Supervisor Alverman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is no urgency for this. No big rush. I've been here 18 years. We've used paper. If we go another 6 months using paper, I think that's fine. The reason I asked that this be referred back to the committee is that we didn't have this total document in front of us last Tuesday's meeting. The last 3 paragraphs were added afterwards. I do not, and I was wide awake at that meeting, definitely remember the completely paperless on January 13th for the entire county board. We did not discuss that. I would not have agreed to that. A couple other supervisors, I believe, were questioning the same type of thing. We did discuss the 3 committees being pilot committees and doing this in November. We definitely did not say we were going to be completely paperless in January. So I believe it needs to be clarified. Go back to the executive committee. It's not the end of the world. If this takes another month, we have the full document in front of us at that committee, and we can debate it and we can agree to certain portions of it. But we don't need this pushed through and have things added after discussion. So again, this is not an urgent matter. I think everyone needs to understand that. This is something that can happen in a month. It's not urgent. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Alderman. Supervisor Brunick.
Mr. Chairman, this is also when Supervisor Elverman stated that he gets his packets on Friday, which is a surprise to everyone since the packets are done on Friday. So I don't know how he thinks he gets his packets on Friday. These 3 paragraphs were talked about specifically when we had our discussion with IT, when we talked about the timing of how this was all going to roll out. When I read the email from IT to the committee, and we talked specifically about each one of these. When we got done, and I had to finish up the resolution and get it over to Linda, I called her specifically and asked her if this was the wording on it. I emailed it over to her. She wrote back to me and said yes. She listened to the tape again, and this was specifically what we had talked about and what was agreed upon in the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Brunick. Supervisor Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is to speak on the referral issue. The sense I'm gathering from our summers here is not the issue of are we in favor of going paperless or not. It's more a matter of the implementation. As they say, the devil is in the details, and that's what we're talking about this evening. I would propose that when this goes back to committee, hopefully it does, during that committee they will discuss a phased-in implementation. I think the things that are brought up by Supervisor Skalitsky, having a screen come down and having it on documentation, great idea. I think the idea of having both electronic and papered transition period, I think it's a good idea. Are we in a rush to do this tomorrow? I don't think we are. So I think if this goes back to committee, it gives us a time to work out some of these details. And just one last parting comment. When I look at this screen up here, and I'm pressing my button to speak on a particular issue, I thought that this screen was able to rate the speakers in order of their wanting to speak. Why is that not happening? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Grady. Seeing no other lights, on the referral back to committee, roll call is requested. Yes, you want it sent back to committee. No, you don't. Okay, it is referred back to the committee. $12-9.
Resolution 47 from Human Service Committee, a resolution to approve the reappointment of Supervisor Ed Kubicki to the Kenosha County Human Service Board. Alman, yes. Boyd Frederick, yes. Anita Johnson, yes. Decker, yes. Arrington, excused. Montemiro, yes. Nudo, yes.
Supervisor Holman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move Resolution 47.
Supervisor Holman has moved Resolution 47, seconded by Supervisor Boyd Frederick. Supervisor Holman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a resolution to approve the reappointment of Supervisor Ed Kubicki to the Kenosha County Human Services Board. Supervisor Kubicki has been an active member of the Human Services Board since 2006. The Human Services Committee unanimously approved Supervisor Kubicki's appointment.
Thank you, Supervisor Holman. Supervisor Montemuro.
That was actually on the last one.
Okay. Seeing no lights, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The resolution passes.
Resolution 48 from Human Service Committee and Finance Admin Committee, a resolution to modify 2012 budget for the Healthy People Kenosha County Transform Wisconsin Grant Program. Allman, yes. Frederick, yes. Johnson, yes. Nita Johnson. Arrington, absent. Decker, yes. Decker, no. Montemiro, yes. Nudo, yes. Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. O'Day, excused. Grady, excused. Komeyer, yes. Kubicki, yes. Molinaro, yes.
Supervisor Holman?
Mr. Chairman, move Resolution 48.
Resolution 48's been moved by Supervisor Holman, seconded by Supervisor Anita Johnson. Supervisor Holman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a resolution to modify the 2012 budget for the Healthy People Kenosha County Transform Wisconsin Grant Program. The Division of Health received grant funding in the amount of $460,000 from the University of Wisconsin Board of Regents, which is the Wisconsin Clearinghouse for Prevention. This is a 26-month grant period, which will commence August 1st of 2012. The grant will fully fund a half-time staff person using existing staff. The Division of Health is partnering with Kenosha Unified School District, Kenosha Ymca, and the Racine Kenosha Walworth County Tobacco Free Coalition for this program. The goal of the project is to reduce the prevalence of cancer, heart disease, and other chronic illnesses by promoting healthy environments and healthy choices. Specifically, over the next 5 years, to reduce tobacco use, obesity, heart disease, and stroke by 5%. This budget modification poses no additional levy-funded cost to the county. Just sort of an additional note here, there was some concern in committee among a couple of our members. Part of this program, some of the participants are advocating for some sort of equality in terms of tobacco taxes, and that raised an eyebrow or two on the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Holman. Supervisor Decker?
As you can see, I voted against this in committee. I will vote against it on the county board floor. I read through the RFP, and there were things in the proposal that, in my personal opinion, I don't think taxpayers should be paying for, like lobbyists to lobby to increase the tobacco tax, paying people to write letters to the editor about smoking. Things like that, I don't think at a time when our budgets are so tight, we should be spending money on things like that. So I will be, again, voting against this. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. Seeing no more lights, this is a budget modification, and we will have a roll call. We'll see it. Supervisor Boyd Frederick.
Thank you. One of the things that Supervisor Decker brought up, I spoke to the Ledge Council up in Madison, and actually anything that would be done taxation-wise would not be constitutional. So we don't need to worry about that at all, because there's a uniform clause, and Kenosha could not do anything and not have Racine or Milwaukee do that, so that's not an issue at all.
Thank you, Supervisor Boyd Frederick. Supervisor Decker?
I believe they're going to lobby statewide to increase taxes, not just countywide. It's stated in the RFP to lobby for tax equity and things like that. So if they're not going to do it, then we shouldn't be paying them for it. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. Supervisor Holman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps just a little bit of clarity on the lady's remark. A loophole in the Wisconsin law allows some tobacco products to be treated differently than cigarettes, making things like fruit-flavored, or also known as other tobacco products, cheaper and more accessible to Wisconsin youth. Little cigars are cigarettes, but because they're wrapped in brown paper, the law classifies them as other tobacco products, and thus they have a different tax rate on what is an essentially identical product. So this group is in some way aiming to perhaps address that on a statewide level. Just one other note, Wisconsin, $5.7 billion in healthcare costs is what this state is impacted by due to smoking. $1.4 billion lost in workplace productivity, And other costs, premature death, $1.9 billion, direct medical expenditures, $2.3 billion. In Kenosha, annually we're impacted $81.1 million in healthcare costs and $50 million in lost productivity. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Hallman. Supervisor Molinaro.
Well, I want to thank Supervisor Decker for making the points that she made. And strangely enough, the points that Supervisor Hallman just addressed were talked about in relatively well detail. Yet the issue of paying lobbyists was somewhat, and not somewhat, wasn't mentioned at all during the presentation of the Finance Committee. The question I have through the chair to, I'm not sure who's over, to Ms. Johnson is, when I asked the question about the employees that this grant funding would cover, they are all employees who are currently within an agency, either with Kenosha County or one of the other cooperating agencies, if I'm not mistaken, who are not full-time employees, but their hours will be increased by this grant to cover those expenses. And I want to confirm that, number one. And number two, then piggyback on Supervisor Decker's question, which I would have asked in finance had I caught the issue of lobbyists in here. Is any of this $460,000 going toward lobbying our state legislators? If I could, again, through the chair to Ms. Johnson. And if so, who's doing the lobbying?
Thank you. I think this is on. All the employees, in regards to that question, we have a health department employee whose hours were reduced and will be working half-time to move her hours up to full-time. The Tobacco-Free Coalition contract, the individuals that work for that contract, their hours were reduced because of funding reduction, so their hours will be going back up to full-time. The school district is hiring a teacher who's been substituting. He was a full-time teacher, lost his job, and he was volunteering to help over the summer to water the gardens. He's very committed to the garden program, and now he'll be receiving some hours to work on this project with the schools and the kids. And then lastly is the YMCA, and they too would be increasing the hours of an individual. And your question in regards to
the lobbyist
Thank
lobbying
you.
efforts.
There, in our budget, there is no dollars associated with a lobbyist.
So any lobbying efforts would be efforts that would be coming from outside of our grant and be done elsewhere. I'm not suggesting that's appropriate. I happen to agree fully with Supervisor Decker that it seems crazy that we are providing these dollars on any level to pay lobbyists. I just had my uncle in from California this past week who bought a pack of cigarettes here in Wisconsin and about fell over at the taxes compared to what they pay in California. So I'm not sure if there's much more room to tax anymore. I don't know what they cost. I don't smoke. So it seems counterproductive on some level that we're taking tax dollars to pay lobbyists to advocate for one position or another. I don't care what the position is. I don't know how that fits the model of what was presented to the Finance Committee. I'm not sure it's enough for me to change my mind this evening, but certainly it is a question that ought to be asked, and someone ought to be paying attention to it, and that someone probably is our legislators beyond Kenosha County. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Molinaro. Seeing no more lights, we'll have a roll call on this since it is a budget modification. That resolution passes 19-2.
Resolution 49 from Human Service Committee and Finance Administration Committee to defund and leave unfilled the position of public health nurse and fund an advanced nurse practitioner in the Division of Health. Hallman, yes. Boyd Frederick, yes. Anita Johnson, yes. Arrington, excused. Decker, yes. Montemero, yes. Nudo, yes. Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. O'Day excused. Grady excused. Colmeyer, yes. Molinaro, yes.
Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move Resolution 49.
Resolution 49 has been moved by Supervisor Hallman, seconded by Supervisor Decker. Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a resolution to defund and leave unfilled the position of public health nurse and fund an advanced nurse practitioner. The Division of Health desires to replace a vacant public health nurse position with an advanced nurse practitioner position. The advanced nurse practitioner will provide the Division of Health with additional flexibility for the expansion of clinical services and also allow for the recoupment of additional funding for services provided by the advanced nurse practitioner. The Division of Health has received additional grant funding for the expansion of women's health services in Kenosha County, and the funding will be allocated to fund the position of the advanced nurse practitioner. This position does not require a budget modification because there is sufficient funding in the appropriate personnel line item.
Thank you, Supervisor Hallman. Seeing no lights, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That resolution passes.
Resolution 50 from Public Works Facility and Finance Administration Committee, a resolution to approve the acceptance of grant funding for the purpose of removing the Pike River Dam at Petrifying Springs. Alverman, yes. Noble, yes. Dodge, yes. Nudo, yes. Galitsky, yes. Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. O'Day excused. Grady excused. Colmeyer, yes. Kubicki, yes. Molinaro, yes.
Supervisor Alverman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move Resolution 50.
Resolution 50 has been moved by Supervisor Alverman, seconded by Supervisor Dodge. Supervisor Alverman.
Mr. Chairman, we've been reporting this project ongoing, the dam removal, which is going to provide many things. One of the largest is fish movement, species movement that has been blocked. The dam is no longer needed, and we have received roughly $420,000, I believe, in grants. Mr. Rudy from our Parks Department has been prolific in grant writing and has done a phenomenal job. The total project cost is in the $600,000 range, but we have just been granted this one from the state, $42,000, and it could possibly be increased up to $50,000. So I would ask for your approval. It is something that is going to benefit many.
Thank you, Supervisor Alverman. Seeing no lights, this is a budget modification. Roll call, please. We can't.
We have to wait for Supervisor.
No.
No. No. Because the system won't do it because he's supposed to vote. It's not marked absent. He's not marked absent. Well, we don't know how he's going to vote.
And the grand entrance.
How do you want to vote, Dan?
21 to 0, that resolution is passed.
Resolution 51 from Public Works Facility and Finance Administration Committee, a resolution to repurpose Public Works budgeted funds to be used for completion of the parking structure project. Alverman, yes. Noble, yes. Dodge, yes. Nudo, yes. Galitsky, yes. Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. O'Day excused. Grady excused. Colmeyer, yes. Kubicki, yes. Molinaro, yes.
Supervisor Alverman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself this evening, but this resolution was changed since the Public Works Facilities Committee voted on it. The Finance Committee apparently added or amended it. And the last sentence of the resolution to rebid the project prior to expending funds on said project. Therefore be it resolved. So I can't move it. My committee voted on it in a different fashion than it's printed here. So I would either have to pull my committee, see if they would go along with the way it has been amended. I wasn't informed by the Finance Committee that they had amended it. Before I do that, I would like to comment a little here, and then I will pull my committee. This has been an ongoing project. The bids that were put out to 350 of our vendor list, if you want to call it that, people that are local contractors, statewide contractors and things. We received one bid. Now I've been informed that there's a couple people interested in it. They had to have received this bid for proposal. Biggest problem we ran into on this is that since this is...
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Point of order.
I would defer to the parliamentarian in the room, but I don't believe we can have this discussion without a motion being on the floor.
Point of order is correct that there should be a motion made. There was an explanation of why a motion was not made, but I think that the point of order is correct, that usually a motion precedes statements and debate.
Then, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull my committee on the resolution here on the floor.
Does that need to go before or after a motion? Pardon me?
It's proper to pull this committee since the second committee to review it changed the resolution so it's not the same as the one that the other signer, the Public Works Committee, signed. So you can pull it to see if they're in favor of it.
Supervisor Molinaro.
Again, and I'm not trying to be difficult here. However, if we're going to poll the committee, are we not polling the committee essentially asking them if they support the resolution in its new form, which therefore is debate? Why not just go to the Finance Committee Chairman to move the resolution if the Chairman, and I respect Supervisor Elverman's position here, but I'm just saying if we're going to go and poll, now we're saying do you support or not support the resolution in its current form? That's my objection.
He has the floor, so that's why he's polling this committee. I mean, he didn't have to be recognized, but he had the floor before the Finance Chairman had the floor, so I think it's proper to poll the committee.
Do you want to pull them now, Supervisor Elverman, or wait till after a motion's made?
No, I'd like to pull them now, and then we'll go from there. Supervisor Noble.
Signature is on a resolution that I actually didn't sign it as it is written. That's why I don't like these back page signatures on the back of the resolution.
Supervisor Dodge.
I would not support sending it out for more proposals because we belabored that discussion in our committee and how complex the RFP was.
Just a yes or no on the...
No.
No? Okay.
Supervisor Nudo.
He's not here.
Supervisor Skalitsky.
Go ahead. He's pulling his committee. Supervisor Skalitsky.
Just for a point of clarification to my chairman, can you specifically state what has changed from what we had versus, because I don't have them both in front of me.
No, that's debate. Let's
okay,
just...
I'm sorry. Then,
yeah,
no, I'm not going to support.
Okay. So that's 2 no's, a yes, and Nudo's not here.
And a no from the chairman.
Okay.
So I will, I guess, state that the Public Works Facilities Committee is not in favor of this, and leave it at that.
Supervisor Rose?
I would move the resolution.
The motion's been moved by Supervisor Rose, seconded by Supervisor Molinaro. Supervisor Rose?
First, let me give you a little history about the resolution 51, and I think then you'll understand why the committee amended the resolution, and I will read to you the amendment, which you will find in the very last paragraph at page 1 of the resolution, and the phrase is, "and to rebid the project prior to expending funds on said project." That is the change. The parking ramp was started in the year 2004. It was to be completed as with gates, sufficient lighting, and the theory was that there would be a cost for parking there by both county employees, visitors to the courthouse, or people who are attending business at the courthouse, as well as people who would be taking the train to Chicago or somewhere in northern Illinois. The federal funds paid for the parking ramp in large measure because of the use of the train, and the parking ramp was going to assist them in being able to park near the train. So that's where the federal funding came about. As part of the construction, there was the gates. The entry was going to be probably by some sort of card or system with a cost and fully lit. Now, if you pass by the ramp, you will see that there is no gate there. There is no charge. I understand that there is a charge that is rather haphazardly collected through the county for people who want to park there long term. But there is not a regular ticketing over there. I think on occasion I have heard that there is some ticketing. So basically it's largely for free. And this has been going on since 2004. When it came before our committee, we asked the question, well, why wasn't this completed? That's the obvious thing. Why are we now considering this issue in 2011? And we really never received a sufficient answer. We asked the administrators who were in attendance at the committee. Nobody seemed to have a definitive answer to that question. When we got then to the issue of the cost of the project, we were told that this is what the additional cost would be, and they had sent out bids and got one bid. Hundreds apparently had received this, and only 4 showed up to view the project and consider bidding on it, and of those 4, only 1 submitted a bid. So it was both the highest bid and the lowest bid. It was the only bid. This struck many of the committee members as rather odd, that in this type of economic environment with a real depression in the construction industry, there would be only 1 contractor bidding on this project. The committee didn't like that, and therefore this phrase was added to it to rebid the project prior to expending funds on said project. We certainly didn't see the urgency connected with finishing this project was 2004. We didn't have any explanation before us as to why it took all of these years. We didn't like the fact that there were really 4 people who considered submitting a bid, and really only 1 came forward. We didn't like the smell of it. And so we therefore said and amended the resolution, which we continue to support this evening, rebid the project.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Grady?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to be clear through Corporation Counsel, Over can comment upon this. when we look at this resolution as it's been amended, funds from the completed projects and to rebid the project prior to expending the funds in said project, is that necessarily a mandate or an advisory type of sentence? That's my.
I read that as a mandatory condition on approval of the resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Grady. Supervisor Molinaro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the installer of this system, they notice that we keep going like this. That's a design flaw they might want to correct. They can add that to their list of many issues to work on. And that's serious. You know, when we can't see that light, whether we know the microphone is on, that to me just is a fundamental thing they should be looking at. I want to address briefly, because Supervisor Grady brought it up, if I can. The reason this change in verbiage was put in here relative to the expenditure of surplus funds is because part of the way to cover the overage that was brought to the Finance Committee and also to the Public Works Committee was to forego a 2012 capital project, which was a boiler or rooftop unit or something, if I'm not mistaken, chiller, was to forego this chiller project in 2012 to a future date and spend those dollars on this parking structure. I personally, and apparently the committee, as we made this amendment, was not comfortable with that. Surplus dollars from construction projects I am okay with, but to forego projects that we specifically put in the budget for a given year, in that given year, in order to cover an overrun in a project that has been out there for a while, I simply wasn't comfortable with it. The other point I want to make is that the rebid process, and I got some information from Mr. Arbit since last Wednesday, and I appreciate the discussion that we had and certainly what they're up against, but this tells me two things. If I'm not mistaken, they're talking about somewhere around 11 to 13 weeks of additional time to rebid a project. I'm also, if my numbers are correct, it's an 800-page spec. 288 pages of a spec book that was put out to put parking gates and a few light fixtures up. So if this doesn't need to send a message back to the state that things can be done a little bit quicker and a little bit easier, I don't know what you need to be able to send that message. There's no reason a rebid of this thing should take 13 weeks. And when you're talking about this type of project, exclusive of lead time, you're really talking about a couple of weeks to get this equipment installed. So we've been sitting for a while. I know they're looking for the revenue that is projected to come out of this structure. I still suspect that if it's pushed quickly, we can get this thing done and installed the first part of 2013. I don't think we're going to lose much more revenue than we've already lost. I'd like to, in the last couple of days since this article was in the newspaper, I've had calls from and we all like to say on the board floor, I've had calls about this issue. I've had calls from 2 local contractors who say that they would like the opportunity to bid the project. It just makes sense to me to put this back out to bid. You get one bid, it's over budget, put it back out. If it comes in at the same number, then we know we need to move forward. If not, you have the opportunity to save some dollars here without dipping into funds, surplus funds. Whether we find it somewhere or we don't find it somewhere, it's just the right thing to do. I can't remember in the last 3 or 4 years that I had fewer than a record number of bidders. It just doesn't strike me as making much sense why we didn't have more bidders on this project. So I'd like to see it rebid. That was the motion. In my opinion, it's relatively harmless. We've provided an opportunity for the department to proceed without coming back to either committee. So it should be relatively quick if they push the issue with the state, and I hope they will. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Molinaro. Supervisor Kubicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could ask the Public Works Director a few questions, please. Thank you, sir. Why do you think that this project was put on the back burner since 2004?
Well, I'll give you a little background. It was actually the county received the grant, I believe, in roughly 2002. I think the construction was initiated in 2004, and it was considered substantially complete in 2006, a few years before I got here. Why it was actually open for business in 2006 without the control access gates installed, as I indicated in the paper, it's anybody's guess. If I had been here, it wouldn't have happened, because the bottom line is, part of the grant stipulates that you have to have access control in place in order to be in compliance with the grant. So technically, we've been compliant with the grant, non-compliant with the grant, since we've had it open, not to mention the revenue that's been lost. Just to give, if I can, just to give a little more background, this is the document. Well, once I found out that this thing hadn't been tied up the way it was supposed to, shortly after I had come on, and I got hired in late 2008, started working with the state. The state actually contracts with a third party, DAR, a private consulting firm, to manage these CMAQ projects. CMAQ stands for Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Grants. To Supervisor Rose's point of the whole thing is put up in the anticipation or the hope that more folks ride the Metro, and that's why the feds funded the project in the first place. So they use DAR to manage this process because it's so complicated. So I worked with the people at DAR, and we had to bring on a consultant, an engineering consultant, to help us define the specs to put this document together. And we had to make sure we crossed every T and dotted every I, because if you're non-compliant with what the grant stipulates and how it's supposed to be managed, when you do go to spend the money on the project, it can be disallowed. Some of the things can be disallowed and you won't get reimbursed for them. And right now, as long as you follow the rules, any dollar we spend, we get reimbursed 90%. So that building was put up with the anticipation it's 90% federally funded, 10% with local dollars. So as long as we follow the rules, create this massive document, we're okay. So this came together, and we got final approval in July of this year to put this document out. The bids closed August 17th. We had a walkthrough, a mandatory walkthrough, after we had sent it to, normally we send it to 2 newspapers, the Daily Reporter, which is a regional report, a construction project newspaper that's linked electronically to everything nationwide. We normally send to them, and the Kenosha Labor paper. We also send it to the Kenosha News. So we went to 3 publications. In addition to, Carol's got a list in purchasing of all of the contractors the county's done business with that are certified to do business with the county, which is, as Supervisor Elmerman said, roughly 350, 360 contractors. It was sent out to all of them. The mandatory walkthrough, 4 people showed up. My gut tells me the average small contractor that looked at this at what we estimated to be a $160,000 project and said, "You're joking, right? I got to go through all this for a $160,000 project?" I think that's why 4 people showed up for the walkthrough, and one of those people tossed their hat in the ring. Now, the way this works is, in order for us to do an award even for this, the state says if you get less than 3 bids, or it comes 10% over what your estimate was, you've got to do an explanation of why we should still make the award. So basically the same questions that were asked in our Public Works Committee, as well as at the Finance Committee, the state anticipates that in these kinds of situations. So in the narrative, I explained to them the same thing. You know, we've robustly advertised this thing in an attempt to solicit as many quotes as we could get. We didn't get any. And the reason is, I think, because of this document and a fairly narrow kind of specialized thing that we're doing. All we're trying to do is get access gates in, deal with some security system issues and some lighting issues. If they had all been done as part of the project, the original project, it would have been the way to handle it. For whatever reason, they weren't. I don't know why. Bottom line is, we're just trying to tie up the loose ends so we can close the project out. If we do, you know, I'll work with it either way. My expectation is that if we can get this, we don't have to rebid it. I've got everything in line now. Every T is crossed, every I is dotted with the state, which, just to give you an idea on one specific issue, there's a disadvantaged business component to this project because of the way it's funded. So it took the contractor, the one bid that we got, it took him 3 weeks to line up the appropriate subcontractors to meet the relatively small 4% DBE requirement of the grant. It took him 3 weeks to just do that piece of it. So if we do rebid this, I'll make it work, you know, we'll work with it however we got to, but it will push this out because we will have to jump through, all the specs exist, we don't have to rewrite any of that stuff, but we still have to go through a number of steps with the state in order to rebid this, and it would push things out probably, as Supervisor Molinaro indicated, till probably early next year, versus we could get it done now. That kind of summarizes where it's at. I know, though, that in conversations with Carol I had today, that she may have some concerns from a purchasing standpoint if we toss this bid, what that does, because the bid was done in a totally kosher manner. If we toss this bid now, the bidder, the one guy that did throw his hat in the ring, may have an issue.
Did the particular person at the company that put the bid in, is he out dollars on this particular project?
The only thing I know, that he's put effort into is I know he's had to do some work to line up the disadvantaged business pieces of the puzzle in order to get things ready to submit to the state for them to bless it and give us approval to move forward. That's the only thing I know that he's had to do so far.
Okay, and then one other question. Did you do a cost analysis of how much money we would be generating by having those gates up?
We're conservatively projecting 30 to 40 grand a year is what we're projecting.
Thank you. Got one further question to ask the purchasing agent. She was referred to by the Public Works Director. I'd like to get her input on this, please.
Well, I don't like not getting competition on bids. That's contrary to what we do. But that being said, I agree with Ray in that I feel that the document itself is what scared most people away. But the bidder that did submit a bid, he did this in good faith. He attended the pre-bid meeting. He obtained all the necessary insurance and bonding requirements. He completed his vendor responsibility forms. He complied with the hundreds of pages of federal documents that were required. And all this was done at his time and his expense, which the expense was probably minimal. If we rebid the project, we're not changing it in any manner. We're not changing the scope of work. We're not adding anything to it. The federal requirements and the state requirements will still be there. So what scared away the small business owners before is still going to scare them away. His bid was submitted timely. It was opened at a public bid opening. So now his bid is a public document. Anybody can see it, and they'll know what he bid originally. Since our original bidder complied with all the requirements and we're not changing it, my fear is that this original bidder now has grounds for a bid protest if we throw it out, which could delay our project and could cost us in legal terms. That's my main concern. I don't think that it's a good idea in the county's best interest to rebid it.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification on that. That's all.
Thank you, Vice Chair Vicky. Supervisor Skalitsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for a point of clarification, people don't have to look at the back side of their microphone. All they have to do is look at the little red light that flashes in front of their eyes, and their microphone is on. I couldn't have had it said any better than Mr. Arbit and from procurement. The ramp opened, and I'm not sure if it was 2004, 2006, it's 2012, and we're still debating this. We're talking roughly, and our committee debated this at length. We went through a lot of Q&A with the facilities personnel. And personally, I think that they have a lot better things to be doing with their time than sending out another bid. I understand, and the clarification we just got out of procurement makes it even more concrete to me that I don't support this going out for another bid. I did support it in my committee as was written. And the reason is because if you're talking about a revenue estimate between $30,000 and $40,000, and what might we save by going out and getting another bid? A few $1,000s? Well, we could get those gates up, to Supervisor Molinaro's point, in a relatively short period of time and start collecting on the revenue that we should have been for probably a number of years. You saw that document that Mr. Arbit held up. I wouldn't want to have to sort through that thing, let alone a small contractor, and find all the small details in there. This thing is all teed up. It's ready to go. I can't see any reason why we would want to spend our administration and personnel's time having this thing rebid for a few $1,000s. And to the other point is, we are setting ourselves up because this contract or this bid has been opened up to the public, that perhaps there is some litigation available to us. Let's go ahead and get this thing done, get the gates up, and get the revenue flowing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Skalitsky. Supervisor Noble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Supervisor Skalitsky said what I was going to say. We did discuss that. In fact, I'm the one who brought it up about sending out sending it out for rebid, and Mr. Arbit spoke to that. The purchasing director has validated what he said. Roughly speaking, if it takes us 4 to maybe 6 months longer to get this parking structure going, the revenue from that would be, you know, maybe $15,000 to $20,000. This is $23,868 in additional net costs to the county. So you're talking $3,000 to $8,000 max, and we don't have to worry about any litigation. I think it's a disservice to the one place that did do what he was supposed to do. So, but I think, you know, the larger problem that I have with this is the fact, and Mr. Chairman, I think you really should delve into this with consultation with Corporation Counsel, but the fact that this came to committee and not back to our committee, so that we would have a chance to vet whatever, you know, amendments, and then we get polled and we can't speak on it when we're getting polled. We have to wait until later on. I don't think that's a very good way to be presenting a resolution on the floor of the county board. I don't recall this ever happening this way before. Generally speaking, it would come with just one signature of the committee and not go back to our committee, or it would go back to our committee and we could either sign on or take our name off. Not have the illusion that you've got two committees 100% in favor of it when one committee really hasn't seen the resolution as it's being presented. So I think you need to get the rules of the road out there for the administration, basically, so they can follow it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Noble. Supervisor Ron Frederick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'm on. Well, I was one of the, I made the second to the motion to go ahead with this and then rebid it. And then, of course, the rebid would be, it wouldn't have to come back to the county board as long as it came under the figure that the original bid was. But, and I agree with Supervisor Noble that I thought that it would go back to that committee before it came to the county board, because we changed what they did. So I think I agree with that. That has to be looked at. But I would suggest that if, and I still stand by the fact that I think it should be rebid, because to me it doesn't pass the smell test, and a little bit of revenue we're going to get from the public I'd rather do a bid process that I think is, I know this would be legitimate if we did it again, but I would suggest that we're going to debate this for a while, that the committee or someone from the other side of this thing make a motion to amend it back to the original resolution that the committee passed, and we can talk about that rather than, you know, debate, you know, because obviously he pulled his committee, they're against it, and somehow this thing has to get done. So I would suggest that, I mean, this is just my suggestion or thought, that someone from that committee should make a motion to amend it back to the original form, and we can talk about that.
Thank you, Supervisor Frederick. Supervisor Montemuro.
Thank you, Chairman. I have one question. This one bidder, first the question really is, when it first was built, were those specs supposed to be done at that time? And if they were supposed to be done, where's the person who built this? He's not the one being bid, correct? So, all right. To me, that doesn't sound quite right, and I would agree with referring it back to the committee that was working on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Montemuro. Supervisor Molinaro.
Well, first of all, Supervisor Ron Frederick did exactly what I was going to do, try to be helpful here, because I saw at the last time we had a contentious issue on the board floor, just died because there wasn't the forethought to get it back to committee or keep it alive. So if in fact you don't like the amendment, someone on the board floor needs to make an amendment to this resolution, or it is going to either go forward as it is or die completely. To the point of Supervisor Elverman, if it's a 4 to 6 month delay, 3 of those will happen in 2011, which is only a month or two in 2012. You're not going to lose anywhere near the $30,000 in revenue that was just mentioned, or 15 to 20, I believe was the number. And as far as the bidder, if we don't have language in our specs that allow the county and give us, and I bid an ample number of public sector projects as well, and maybe we don't, but I can tell you that most of what I do, if not all, has the ability for the county to make the decision in their discretion as to whether to take or not take a bid. This project is over budget. End of story. Enough right there to say we don't accept the bid. If that isn't the case, my relatively limited professional opinion, I guess, in this arena would suggest we should take a look at that. I don't see any concern on my part for a lawsuit. They also, I would suspect the bid document states that any dollars expended in effort to put together and submit a bid has no bearing whatsoever on the county or anybody else, and it is a risk that you take and a risk that you accept. It's in everything else that I bid. So you don't like it, make a motion. Otherwise, before you is to rebid it and not, more importantly, or as importantly to me anyways, not forego 2012 allocated budget capital improvement projects to fund a project that is over budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Molinaro. Supervisor Elverman.
I didn't have to look down here. Splash.
Good job, Supervisor.
I didn't know
Thank
that.
you.
I didn't know that till I was told.
He's an educator.
Had a lot of things run through my mind here the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes. One, I'm still angry at the voting system because I didn't know where I was in that order. There's just a bunch of emotions here. My committee, did take a lot of time on this. Mr. Arbit spent a lot of time. The state people, everybody in facilities spent a lot of time on this. In 2004, I was elected chairman of the county board. Shortly after that, in 2006, Supervisor Rose was elected chairman of the county board. So we were the county board chairman during this construction. I guess Supervisor Rose didn't know we didn't have gates. I certainly didn't. I'm not going to make a big deal out of this evening, but there's, I guess, plenty of blame to go around. We could look back, and I think all we'd have to do would be I could probably make one phone call tomorrow and find out why this wasn't done. There's one man that we all know that probably knows why. But we don't need to spend a couple hours on this evening. I could make a motion to amend this. We'll debate it for another hour, hour and a half. Rebidding this, I don't think is the wisest thing. I've been in this process, as Supervisor Molinaro has for years. We had one bidder for a reason. Mr. Arbit showed us that. He shared that with the committee over the past months. We knew we're not in charge of this. If we were in charge of it, if we could hire a local guy to do it, you might get things done. But when a contractor is held to these standards, they're not taking a chance. This guy probably bid with his pocketbook in his hand. This is what he's got to get. If these so-called guys are calling and saying, we'd be interested in bidding this, where were they? I don't know where these guys were. Now all of a sudden they're coming out, two guys. It'll be interesting to see how many bids we get on this. I'm not going to make that motion. I don't think it's worth the argument that we might have on it this evening. I don't think Mr. Arbit's going to sleep any worse if we rebid this. I'm not going to. But I think it's a big waste of time. I think that sometimes people like to discuss something just to hear themselves. And I think that's a little bit of what we're hearing this evening. We also, none of us, even though some of us in the room act surprised at this, we've all been aware of this parking garage since 2004. This is no big surprise. Those people that live and work near the courthouse specifically are aware of it. So let's rebid it, see what happens. And the next time that someone changes a resolution and doesn't inform the committee chairman, whether it be the chairman of the other committee or the administration, if it's my committee, they'll be held to pay. That's where I'll leave it this evening.
Thank you, Supervisor Alverman. Supervisor Kubicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to make that friendly amendment right now.
What is the friendly amendment, please?
To on the paid resolution 51 on the final therefore to strike and to rebid the project prior to expanding funds on said project, and to fix the typo on the backside. And if I get a second on that?
Seconded by Supervisor Anita Johnson.
Yeah, due to the fact that the possible litigation, the lost revenue especially, I'd like to just vote this thing up or down, get it going. If you want it to go through, let's get it through. If you don't, vote against it, and let's move on.
Thank you, Supervisor Kubicki. Supervisor Aaron Decker.
I was just going to make the motion too, so never mind.
Okay. Thank you. Supervisor Kohlmeyer.
Yep. Yeah, I was just going to say, add to the discussion that to me this still doesn't, not to say that there's foul play, but you get one bid, it's 35% over our estimate. I mean, normally from what my experience is, our administration gets us pretty close to once we get the bids in, they're really close. I mean, I think the administration did the good job here and submitted everything correctly, and I think, you know, obviously the specs scared off a lot of people, but to me this is a no-lose to just rebid this and see what we can get, and, you know, it just seems like it's I don't know, it just seems like it's, like, I agree with a couple other comments that just the economic conditions, you have 4 people walk through that a couple of people wouldn't even submit a bid, just doesn't pass a smell test to me, and if we're going to, the last motion, we're trying to save $15,000 on paper. I mean, we could save $60,000. Just let's rebid this and see, you know? I mean, why not? So.
Thank you, Supervisor Kohlmeyer. Supervisor Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we set a poor precedent here by acting this evening by accepting the resolution without rebidding this project. I think there's some unanswered questions here that need to be answered. Why wasn't this building completed in 2006 as scheduled? That's not a county board responsibility. That's an administration responsibility. They submit all of the documents to the state. That's not a county board responsibility. They supervise the project. That's not a county board responsibility. There's a clear division between legislative responsibility and executive responsibility. This is an executive responsibility. It is not our responsibility. It's our job to oversee this issue when it is brought to our attention. It's not our job to supervise the construction of projects. It's our job to authorize the construction of projects. Who's responsible here? No one. No one is responsible. It's an accident that just happened. And I think that those kinds of questions need to be answered. When a grant is obtained and sought in the year 2002, construction started in 2004, supposedly closed out in 2006, and now we find out that it was not completed. We did not have a price for this project. These were some of the issues that we asked at the Finance Committee. we are gaining some revenue here, like some $6,000 we were told, 6,000 plus, and sure we'll make a little more here, but I think there's some more fundamental questions that need to be answered about responsibility here. When we also learned that in this economic climate, only one person submits a bid and 4 do a walkthrough, after hundreds of them are sent out, it doesn't pass a smell test. It raises some eyebrows. If the same result second time around is one bid, well, we'll have to accept that. But I see no rush to judgment here for something that started with a grant application in 2002. Here we are 10 years later. I think we demand some answers here for the taxpayers, and as the custodians of what goes on here, and the policymakers and decision makers on legislative issues, we're not the people that are supposed to be following through here on the construction of projects. That's clearly an administration responsibility. These are the issues we asked at Finance Committee. We didn't get answers, and the proposal from one of the committee members at Finance was, let's rebid that project. I think that's the responsible thing to do this evening. I'm not afraid of any litigation here. I'm not afraid of any bid protest. I think that's a red herring that is suggested to rush this thing and gloss over some fundamental issues that need to be answered. Rebid the project, pass the resolution as originally submitted.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've had a lot of debate, bid, no bid. I would like to call the question on the amendment.
Okay. All those in favor of calling the question? Roll call. Roll call. Just for clarification, the question you are calling is on the amendment.
When you called the question.
I voted. That passes. Okay, let's call the question on the amendment, cutting out that piece of that resolution. All those in favor?
Roll call.
Roll call. Okay. The amendment is going to be exactly as the resolution states, minus and to rebid the project prior to expending funds on said project. That's what's to be eliminated. So it does leave in there Supervisor Molinaro's concern regarding the money they wanted to spend, because I believe on finance they took the chiller out of that. So sure, that's what we're voting on, just eliminating that portion of that, therefore be it resolved. Twelve to 9, that passes. So now on the resolution as presented with that piece out of it. And since that is a budget modification, we will do a roll call on that. Any? Okay. Supervisor Decker?
Okay, this was completed in 2006 or 2004, whatever. Was the original contractor paid to do this?
Through the chair to Ray.
No, it wasn't in the original package, the specifications for the original package.
Okay, so the original con was not paid to do this and then didn't do it. He wasn't asked to do it, so he didn't get paid to do it, correct?
Correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. Supervisor Elverman?
Call the question.
It's been moved to call the question and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Before you is Resolution 51 minus the sentence part that says, and to rebid the project prior to expending funds on said project.
Oh.
That passes 16 to 5. Please continue.
Communication from George E. Melcher regarding future items scheduled before the Planning Development and Extension Education Committee.
We'll receive and file this communication.
David Overman, tree damage.
Refer to the Corporation Council.
Approval of the September 4th, 2012 minutes by Supervisor Esposito.
Geez, I can't hardly wait to
Supervisor Esposito.
have all this shit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to approve the minutes of September 4th, 2012.
It's been moved by Supervisor Esposito to approve the minutes, seconded by Supervisor Decker. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It's been moved by Supervisor Decker, seconded by Supervisor Skalitsky to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye.